Hello 8th graders. In this IXL video we're going to be taking a look at assignment R.1 on the Pythagorean Theorem. Specifically it asks us to find the length of the hypotenuse. So before we jump into that we want to quickly look at some notes about Pythagorean Theorem and right triangles. The Pythagorean Theorem will always deal with a right triangle. We see three sides, it has a right angle, and specifically it helps us find the missing side length for a right triangle. And one very important thing to know is that for this formula it says a squared plus b squared. If you take the two shorter legs, square them and add them together, it has the same value as the hypotenuse squared, or c squared. So what this equation lets us do is if we ever have two sides of a right triangle, this formula, this equation, lets us find the missing side by plugging numbers in. So for this first example here, we see a right triangle, and you see there are side legs of 6, 8, and the longest side we do not know yet, they've labeled it as c. So I'm going to take my formula of a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and I'm going to go ahead and use that, or plug into it, to find the missing side, or in this case c. So I'm going to go ahead, and blue will show as we plug into this formula. A squared is going to become 6 squared, or 6 times 6. B squared is going to become 8 squared, or 8 times 8, and we still don't know what c squared is yet. That's our first step, plugging those numbers into the formula. Then, order of operations takes over. We need to do our exponents before we add together. So shown here now in green, if I do 6 squared, that gives me 36, and if I do 8 squared, that gives me 64. And now our next step, which we'll show to you in purple, we just need to go ahead and add together 36 and 64. And when we add together 36 and 64, we're just going to get to 100. Sorry, I was blocking that for a second. So we get 100 is equal to c squared. And once we're there at 100 is equal to c squared, that's not our answer. We need one final step. This is saying some number squared is equal to 100. And here in orange, I'm going to show how I finish this problem. I always finish with the square root. The square root will tell me what c was originally. It'll get rid of that exponent of 2. And the square root of 100 is just equal to 10, so that tells me that c here is equal to 10 after I take a square root at the end. As I look up here quickly and I put that 10 millimeters on for side c, I can tell that that looks pretty reasonable. This side was 8 millimeters, so this side should be a little longer, and I got that at 10 millimeters. So again, for this whole Pythagorean theorem, you're just using this formula, plugging numbers in, squaring them and adding them together, and then taking the square root. We're going to show a couple more examples here, but that formula that we just showed you on the first problem is really all you need, and it's the same process for each of the other ones we're about to show you. So for our next triangle here, we see c, the long side we do not know yet. We see 5 for one of the short legs, and the other leg, still shorter than c, is 12 feet tall. So my first job here is going to be to plug into this formula. Again, I know a and b, I know the two short legs here, so I'm just going to use a squared plus b squared. Or in this case, 5 squared plus 12 squared is equal to c squared. If you're still watching us, trying to get help here, I'd encourage you to pause the video. Try to do the rest of this yourself before you see me doing it. Your next step now, hopefully you work through this yourself, you would do 5 squared and 12 squared, and we'll put that here in green for you. And 5 squared would be 25, 12 squared would be 144, and that's still going to be equal to c squared. Then at that point you add together 25 and 144. When I add together 25 and 144, here in purple you see they sum together to make 169. As we recall from the last problem, we don't want to know what c squared is, we just want to know what the c was that multiplied by itself to make 169, and the math operation that helps us there is to take the square root. When I take the square root of 169, if you're not sure what that's going to give you, you could go ahead and plug that into a calculator, and we're going to show you quickly here how to find the square root on your calculators for Chromebooks. For the Chromebooks, when you open up this calculator, which is taking a little while to load on my screen here, you enter the number first, and then you type the square root symbol. So in this case, I'm going to put in my 169 first. Oop, I put too much, give me 1 second. My 169 right there. Still can't type that correctly. Try one more time. And then I hit this green button here to find the more advanced symbols, and the square root button is right here. And if I did not know what number multiplied by itself made 169, now this calculator can help me with that square root, can help me realize, oh, C must have been 13. There are other ways to do mental math there, but we definitely want to show you calculators are okay on these types of problems. So with that, at that point, I now know that C is equal to 13, because I took that square root there in orange. And I'd look up here very quickly at the end to make sure that 13 feet for this hypotenuse, the longer side C, seems reasonable, and it looks pretty good when this one's 12 and that one's 5. We don't believe you need this video anymore at this point. We're going to skip ahead and show you a couple of the more difficult ones in the 70, 80, 90 range as you get towards the challenge zone. But again, we think at this point you could be cutting the video off and working through most of this on your own. Jumping ahead to a few more difficult problems, just give me a second as that gets there. Okay, and this is one we're going to show. As they get more difficult, they might give you bigger numbers. I think you're okay to do that using your calculator. And they also may make you get problems where the square root is not perfect. And as you see here, they're asking us to round to the nearest tenth. They're kind of giving us a heads up in the directions that this square root, when we do the Pythagorean theorem, might not give us a nice whole number. So we're going to go ahead and run this one right here. The first thing we'll show in blue, again, we're just plugging numbers in here. A is 1, so we're going to do 1 squared. B is 3, so we're going to do 3 squared. And that needs to be equal to C squared. Your next job is to do those exponents out, and we'll put that here in green. 1 squared makes 1, and 3 squared makes 9. So we get 1 plus 9 equal to C squared. 1 plus 9, of course, is going to give us 10. So our formula, or our equation now says 10 is equal to C squared. And as we know from other problems, I don't know what number multiplied by itself makes 10. It's not some nice, pretty whole number, but I can take the square root to try to figure out exactly what number multiplied by itself, or squared, would give us 10. And I'm going to need to use my calculator for that. I'm going to show you a different way here. I'm going to use the Google toolbar here, or where the URL, the website address goes, and I'm just going to type in SQRT parentheses 10. And that tells me this calculator is saying the square root of 10 is around 3.162. So I'm going to write that down here in orange. Around 3.162. That's kind of what C is equal to. It's pretty close to that. And if I put a dot, 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 like you see me do there, that means the digit keeps going, the decimal is going to keep going without a pattern like we saw on that calculator. Now our job here is going to be to figure out how do we round to the nearest tenth. Well, the nearest tenth, as the directions ask us, mean we need to go to exactly one decimal place. So I'm going to put a red line right under that 1. This is the nearest tenth spot. But I'm also going to circle or put a box around the digit in the hundredths place, right after the tenths place. And here I see 16 is actually closer to 20 than it is to 10. So our final answer here is not going to be 3.1, it's going to be 3.2. So you look to the digit that comes after the tenths place. Tenths place is 1 decimal in. And if it's 5 or bigger, we round up, because 3.16 is closer to 3.20 than it is to 3.10. So if we have to estimate 3.2, it's a little closer than 3.1 would be. That's really all the challenge that they're going to add in R1 is the numbers may get bigger, or when you square root at the end, they might be decimals, and you need to remember how to estimate or round your answer to the nearest tenth. Thank you for watching to the end of this video. If you have any questions, my email address is on the screen now. That's ddoherty3@bostonpublicschools.org. And we would encourage you, even if you're not a Mildred student and you have questions about this video, please feel free to send me an email, and I'm happy to provide some thoughts or some help on any problems. Again, thank you for watching to the end, and good luck on the rest of the IXL work on your own.